And we're back with another fantastic episode of Talk Me Through Your Process, Season 1, Episode 5, a podcast. Chris, why are you clapping? Because I got it right? Mid-intro. Okay. Well, that's how we roll around here, I guess, right? We go with the flow. But
a podcast about?
A podcast about educational leadership. Mm-hmm. Correct? Am I right so far?
So far, so good.
Where you take me to your leader.
There we go.
I had to throw it in there. So we're back. It's been a while since we've been around. It's been busy, but we made time. We found time, and we found a guest. We found someone interested in speaking to us about educational leadership. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Ramona, and she's going to take care of the rest.
Absolutely. So we're very excited to have Heather Jacoby with us today. Heather, I know, who was my vice principal several years ago, and she's now a principal in the Thames Valley District School Board at a high school in St. Thomas. But I'm going to let Heather kind of introduce herself and give us just a quick synopsis of where she's been and where she's at.
Okay. Thanks for having me. So I have been in education for about 22 years. I was a teacher at Glencoe District High School, which is a small high school in a small town, for about 10 years. I had grown up there. I went to school there as a student. I was a student teacher there. And then I thought that I would stay teaching in Glencoe for my whole career. And then I had some good conversations with people who were kind of pushing my thinking. And I ended up applying to be a learning coordinator. So I became a learning coordinator for literacy. And that position allowed me to see a lot of different schools in the board, do a lot of traveling to elementary and secondary schools. And I noticed, I learned a lot about literacy and a lot about leadership and working with adults and setting direction, that kind of stuff. But I also noticed, as I went into different buildings, that the tone of the building, I could feel it in the first 30 seconds that I was in the building. And it had so much to do with the administrators, I found. So I was kind of hemming and hawing about how else I could be a leader. So I ended up becoming a department head at Parkside, which is a school in St. Thomas. And I was a department head there for about 5 years. And I did a 1 year the deferred salary leave, which is a pretty sweet deal, I have to say. And I did my master's at U of T in educational administration. So it was a good chance for me to really learn and dig deep into what this world might look like. And then I did end up applying to become a vice principal. And then I met Ramona at Vowden, a school which definitely stole a piece of my heart. I was there for 3 years, and then I moved to Laurier Secondary School, which is in London. It's a school of about 1,100 students, multicultural. It's very, very diverse. And then I was there for a year, and then I became a principal at Parkside, the school where I had been a teacher not long ago. And then, and it's, again, a school of about 1,100 students. I would say not really culturally diverse on the surface. It feels homogeneous, but it's not homogeneous. So that's kind of the perception versus reality. And I've been principal there for the last year and a half through, a couple ups and downs. That some stuff happened, a little bit of stuff happened. So that's kind of where I am.
So just a clarifying question too, Heather, you did your master's, did your PQP before that or after that?
I did it after that. Yep. I did it after that. I did my master's as kind of I love to learn. I'm a bit of a nerd, as you may know, or you will know, because I would just do this all night. But I was really kind of waffling about, I love teaching, and I really liked being a department head. I felt like that was a good chance for me to be an educational leader, because I had some influence over, I had 10 people in my English department. So I felt like I was able to still teach the kids who I loved, and then still have that influence around instruction and literacy within my department. So I was trying to think about, do I want to leave this? What am I giving up if I decide to go into administration? And I think my year at U of T, and then I did my thesis on It was called The Micropolitical Acumen of Secondary School Principals in Ontario, which sounds very, very smart, I think. And it was so, so good because I got to interview 5 secondary school principals from the board that I work in about their work with teachers. And it's really about the messiness of being a leader, because all of the books talk about the things that you need to do, but the how of doing that work is really messy and muddy. So I was really interested in how people can manage and kind of maneuver through the messiness of the reality of being a leader in school. So that really helped me to reflect on the journey. And then when I took PQP1, I was still really waffling. I have a very good friend who I was really lucky to go through each stage of my administrator training with. So we did PQP1 together. We went through promotional practices together. We did PQP2 together. We're doing new administration together. And we both became vice principals at the same time. We both became principals at the same time. So she's my person that I text, and she always knows what I mean. So anyway, I think she bullied me a little bit into applying when she was applying, because it was hard for me to pull that trigger. I just loved being in the classroom, and I was really worried about missing out on that. So I did my master's, then PQP1, then I applied for vice principalship, then I did my PQP.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that you waffled for a while, because I think the three of us would say that we might be a little bit on the waffle side ourselves. I think, we're a bit on the waffle side, a little bit with syrup, and we have set up this podcast, I think, because we're struggling with that decision. Do we push forward? Yes. Do we stay where we are? What for you was like the tipping point? What for you was, other than the bullying friend, who I know you?
Well, the thing is,
but I know you, and you wouldn't let that friend bully you if it wasn't something you wanted to do. So what was it?
Exactly. I know. I think I kind of needed that friend to just say, well, let's just do it, because I really was back and forth for a while. I had some people saying to me, and I think you really have to, the hard thing is you have to decide it in your heart and in your mind, and you never know when you're ready, just like having kids or whatever, that you're never going to be ready. But I had some people saying, no, you should not go into administration because you're too good a teacher, and we need good teachers in classrooms. And then I had some people saying, no, you need to be an administrator because you're really good with people and all that stuff. So I had these two things in my brain. And my husband, who is not in education, he's very, very wise, and he cuts through all of the baloney in education. I don't know, whether this is a PG podcast, because I can really get my trucker mouth on, but I'm going to try to keep it professional the best I can.
You could have decided that for us. We've been on the fence. Gotta be honest. We've been on the fence. We're just trying to encourage our guests to be more genuine. So,
I don't know. I don't know if you want me to be that genuine, but
do it.
He's good at cutting through all of the educational malarkey. And he said to me, and this was actually when I was trying to decide to move from vice principal to principalship, but I think this advice is really good. It was good for me all along. He said, you have to decide if you want to do it, because you can't let other people say that. Just because other people say you'll be good at it doesn't mean that you should do it. Just because you will be good at it doesn't mean you should do it. And so in a way it doesn't help the decision, but it really pushed me. And so my next series of waffling moves was to ask a whole bunch of people who I respected, well, why did you decide? And so I eventually came to this place where I thought, yes, I think I'm ready, that I want to try using the skills that I've built in the classroom and the skills that I've built as a department head. And I want to see if I can have that influence on kind of a grander scale. And there were a couple of things that a very good friend of mine told me when I was trying to figure out whether to apply for vice principalship. And she said, number one, because I said, I don't want to lose my kids because I just love my classroom. And she said, you will never lose your kids. You will always have your kids, but they're just not always in the same room. And I know as a vice principal and as a principal that I have my kids 1,000%. And in fact, I know them in some ways better than I did as a teacher, because I was going from the classroom. So I wasn't in an SST role. I wasn't in an LST role. I wasn't in guidance. And so as a classroom teacher, I absolutely got to know my kids, but not necessarily that like the really tough family stuff. And so when I became a vice principal, that was a shock to my system. And the school that I went to, Vowden, is a school where there are a lot of kids who experience all kinds of trauma, from poverty and from their family situations. And I mean, heartbreaking. That's what the school burns itself into your soul because of that trauma that kids have experienced. But so this vice principal said to me, you will have your kids, that you will have your class, but they're just not all together. So I had my kids. And in fact, I ended up with a lot of kids at Vowden for sure. So that's the first piece. And the second piece she said was, being an administrator is that we're allowed the privilege of helping people when they're really struggling. And for me, I'm just gonna go there right now. So for me, it's God, but it doesn't have to be God. It can be the universe. But I feel a huge sense of calling, a huge, huge sense of calling, that I was put on the earth to be an administrator. I honestly, and I was sure that I was put on the earth to be a teacher, and I was. But I think if I had not become an administrator, just in terms of the influence that you can have on a large, like the organism of a school community, it's pretty powerful. Like, it's really powerful, actually, the impact that you can have. I mean, that's double. This is the thing. You only need to ask me one question. You may need to shut that mic off at whatever time. But that's a double-sided thing, I think. That's a double-sided, double-edged sword. That's my metaphor. I'm really good at mixing up metaphors, so you can just kind of edit them out or just laugh at me. It's a double-edged sword because
we didn't mention we go end to end. There's no editing. That's So
no.
It's
is
on
there
tape.
any kind of delay?
Yeah,
Awesome.
and
This is great.
it's on tape. Yeah, there's no 10-second delay. There's no
Awesome.
we don't chop it. There's no chopping block on this. It's all
authentic,
great.
genuine.
Awesome.
We don't even
up.
use music. Like, it's
No.
we talk and post. Post.
Except Chris has that really cool background, but
Which one?
Well, just Clank Studios is
Clank Studios. Yeah, it's a mess.
If I could jump in here, I'd like to say a couple of things
Yes.
that are not involved
Yes.
with any of this humor. But okay, so you said a couple of things that really hit home. The waffling is like, I'm full waffle, like totally. Anybody who knows me knows that. But the connection, I have to connect the waffle to the part where you said that you just have to want to do it. So if people tell you you'd be a great administrator, you should do it. That shouldn't be what pushes you in. And on the other side, people who tell you, I don't think you can do it, so you shouldn't. That shouldn't matter either. You should just go with the flow and do you. So I love that, because you said it and I was sitting here thinking, I'm full waffle. And it's because, there's an interest there. And but there are other things happening in my life that take precedent over that interest at the moment. And then there was one other thing that it was there and then it escaped me, but it has to do with, oh shoot, it's gone. It'll come back later. I just wanted to make that connection, the full waffle. But for me, it's more about, you see, here's the thing. So there are people in my life that tell me, you should do it, you'd be good at it. And I appreciate that. But then there's the people that say, I don't think you can do it, so you shouldn't. And the thing that gets me, the thing that I'm hung up on, is that, I don't know about your system, but in my system, if your immediate supervisor does not give the green light for you to proceed in the application process, then you don't proceed. So it's like, you can run up against somebody who says, yeah, I don't think you can do it. And if they're your immediate supervisor, that's a lot of power for them they just hold you back. And so then you enter into this political game. So it's always in my system, from my perspective, it's beneficial that when you decide to do it, that you should be with someone who's going to support you. Because if you don't, and it's this whole game of like, oh, now I need to transfer schools or whatever. I just remembered what I wanted to say. I wanted to say that I really appreciated what you said about wanting to become an administrator and having the ability to change things at a macro level. And that also hits home with me in terms of, there was a time and it may still exist, not so much for me, but there was a time when if you wanted to become an administrator, you had to say things like that. You couldn't just say, I want to be a boss. Like, I've done my work in the classroom. I would like to be the boss. I would like to be the person making big decisions in collaboration with staff. And I think there's a lot to be said about that, because I don't know how many times in my 20 years where I've thought, well, if I were the boss, I would do this differently. And it's like, what's wrong with saying that? You know, in business, it's okay. In business, you can say, I want to be the boss now, so I'm going to apply for a job. But in education, you say that, and everybody looks at you funny, like, well, you can't be the boss. Well, somebody has to be in charge. Somebody has to be responsible for collaboration and for helping people and for being in a position where they can make a positive difference, a bigger positive difference. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks for what you said, allowed me to consider those things. Chris, you have a thought?
I do. And I like that sort of, that being the boss, being sort of exercising your agency and saying, this is a role I want to have. I deeply appreciate it. I think you might be the first person in a while that has kind of stomped the foot and talked about education as a calling. I haven't heard someone say that in a bit. I haven't heard that in a bit. And not to say that people that I've talked to on different pods, that they weren't exuding that kind of energy, but to actually declare it out loud, that's pretty cool. My question is around, so, you know, taking charge of your sort of fate and saying you want to become an administrator and then move into the full principal position. One of the things that I'm wondering about a lot this year is, it's kind of in the zone of, how do you know that you're the right leader for our current circumstances? Because I think that there's, I think COVID has disrupted, I think it's disrupted a lot of systems. And I sometimes wonder about, like, a really low-hanging fruit is sort of talking about how, you know, there's the upside of certain systems being disrupted because they won't go back, and they shouldn't go back to how they were. And I think that's a really kind of interesting, sometimes political, sometimes aspirational way to look at where we are at in education, that, you know, we have an opportunity not to go back to the old system. My belief system is kind of that system's just waiting for us. Like, I think we need to kind of do more to kind of get further to sort of like escape velocity, if you will, away from that. But back to where I was going is, how do you know, or how do you sort of assess whether or not you are still the right leader, considering where education has gone since March 13th? Because I do say that there are educators that are questioning their place in education, like just full on question. They no longer, despite the fact they want to say it's a calling, they're questioning whether or not they even want to be a part of this anymore in the way that it is. So how do you know? Where do you go to sort of figure that out as to whether or not your passion and your calling notwithstanding, how do you know you're still the right person for the job?
So that's a big one. So
sorry, yeah,
you can start the clock on this one, because I'm gonna go to where I suspected that I would go at some point tonight. So I'm blessed because last year, when I was in the middle of my first year as principal, I had some pretty bad habits in terms of working very long hours. And I was back at a school that I had taught at, so lots of the teachers knew me. It's in my hometown, so parents knew me. The feeling that I heard over and over was, thank goodness you're coming to save this school, turn the ship around, whatever, like rescue was used. That's a lot of pressure to put on somebody who's just becoming a principal. And my personality is definitely not somebody who takes that lightly. And so it was a perfect storm. And on November 26th, so 3 days ago last year, I had to take a leave because I was drowning, absolutely drowning. So I that was a blessing for me, because I have like kind of perfectionistic tendencies anyway, and that's the double-edged sword of the calling part, that if you feel called so strongly to make a difference and have a huge impact on people's lives, and then you are coming to a school where people are saying you need to save the school, which wasn't true. The school was fine. But there was some work to be done for sure. It was crippling, and I was not healthy at all. So I ended up being off for 6 weeks last year. And what you were just talking about, Chris, is what I was going through last year, when I really had to wrestle with the question of, is this the right job for me? And the question that I really came to was, from a mental health and wellness perspective, what if you're really good at something? Because I could tell from I could tell from parents, from kids, from staff, from community, I could tell that I was doing a good job of building up the school and building up people, and being visible and working hard and working long hours and being very thorough with everything that I dealt with. So I could tell that from those external things. That's kind of part of what you were asking about, is how do you tell? So part of the question is, there are external things that you can see, that you can hear, emails. It's also the feeling of the building, the feeling of the teachers. But the thing for me was, what if I'm really good at something, but it's not good for me? Is that still a calling? And it took me a long time in those 6 weeks actually to even get to that question, because I didn't know that was the question. I was so unwell that I first had to go back to yoga and walk in the woods and sleep and start to eat again. And I was seeing a counselor regularly. So part of it is I still see that counselor every other week. So that's part of my maintenance program, in terms of thinking about me and the job. And it's not just about that, but I mean, I'm on medication now that I wasn't on before. That's not a good sales pitch for the job, I know, but anyway, I think that for me, those 6 weeks were a huge blessing. And again, I'm going to go to God, higher power. I think that was part of what was preparing me for this year. I really do, because now when I came back to school, I came back with a different kind of mindset, that I could not give all to everybody there, because there was nothing left. And so I am married with 2 kids who are 17 and 19 now. They're both very busy. Away at college, is now home because of COVID. And then and my husband works long hours, and so it was very easy for me to live the job. So go to work at 7 in the morning, come home at 7 at night, just turn the computer on and just keep going. Obviously that's not, you can't keep doing that. So that reflection and hard work that I did then has made me more resilient now. Okay, that's part of the answer, but go, Roland.
Big thumbs up to you for speaking your truth. This is, for me, this is the thing that nobody talks about.
Well, you got the right person.
Well, that's awesome, because when you talk about a sales pitch, I have a lot more respect for people when when their sales pitch is honest. Nobody wants to talk about what you just talked about. Nobody wants to say, I had to take time away because it was not working for me. I needed to reset. Like, to hear you talk about yoga, walking in the woods, eating again, like, come on. We're talking basic needs here. And you had to take time away to get back to who you are. That's what I need to hear from people, because nobody talks about that. Like, I don't know how many times I've said to my administrator, how do I make this work with my family? And one of my administrators, my principal says to me, you'll make it work. You just make it work. You communicate. If you're a vice principal, you communicate with your principal, and you basically lay down, this is my life. So I'm here to work 110% when I'm here. And when I'm not here and I'm working, you're going to get that from me. But there are some things I just can't be here. I need to be with my family. And then my vice principal, she said to me the other day, some days you're not going to be able to leave right away. And it's like, it goes back to, I'm going to do what's right for me. And to hear you just be honest and upfront about it is like, it means the world to me. I can't speak for anybody else, but I need to hear that because we're all human. And I think sometimes principals are given a superhuman job. Like I watch my admin, and there are times when I look at my admin and I'm like, oh God, they're going to blow. Like, how can they hold it together? It's too much. So thanks for your honesty there. And your sales pitch to me is like, hey, you mean if I'm not feeling well, I can do something for myself rather than pretend everything's fine and then just totally burn out, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think part of, I mean, that's a hard lesson because let me tell you, I'm a pretty type A. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it till it's right. I'm going to work hard enough until it's perfect, and I'm going to be there for everybody. I'm not going to drop the ball. And so it's just really, that was very humbling, I would say, for me. I didn't feel, I mean, I had lots of administrator friends say, I'm proud of you and you're really brave to take a leave. And for me, it was like, well, I mean, I had lost a lot of weight, and I was losing hair, and I was throwing up in the morning before I went to school. That's stuff about, like, that's not just about the job though, because that doesn't happen to everybody. It was just this perfect storm of, if you take somebody who has to do the job 110% all the time, and then you put that person in a job that is, I think you're right, Roland. I think the expectations are pretty superhuman. And I would say in a pandemic, they are not lower. They are not lower because the things that we are asked to do in a way that helps people to feel like they can get through it. The way that we were rolling with the punches. We rescheduled the school in 7 days. Like that process takes 3 months, at least 3 months. And we rescheduled the school in 7 days at the end of August. But the fact that that I got to that place means that I've put a lot more things in kind of I have my community now, where if my car is and my car is in front of the school, it's a very public road. And so when my friends and colleagues are driving past at 5 o'clock, my phone starts lighting up because it's a whole community of people who are saying, get in your van and drive home, get in your van and drive home. And it's person after person. My mom cooks a dinner for me sometimes. Like, I'm 45 and my mom cooks dinner for me kind of once a week. My house cleaner comes every week instead of every other week. So there's all kinds of stuff that I've got in place that helps me to be more resilient. It's just that I had pretty bad habits by then. Ramona?
Sorry, couldn't get my mic unmuted.
Rookie.
I am just a tech genius, I'm telling you. Okay.
You are.
So I want to go along. I want to go along that line a little bit, Heather, because I think if I was concerned about the weight of the job before COVID has just made those fears go. So I don't think that you're alone in this. I think that many administrators have struggled tenfold, and I watched what the expectations were put on you in the summer. I mean, principals and vice principals really didn't get a summer this year. And I watch now as students are struggling and staff is struggling, and we're looking up above, and I know that you guys are struggling. So how you talked about how you work on the tone of the building, but how do you keep that tone positive without being a false positive, if that makes sense? Like, I don't want it to be, Roland was talking earlier, like, you got this. It's not about you got this. How are we able to carry that weight as administrator and still be there?
Well,
and be honest about what it is.
I think I'm lucky that my personality is this. So, like, this is who I am. So when like, I'm going to tell you, when you say, are there any areas that we really can't talk about? There are no areas. There's nothing. So I think I was able to be really honest with staff last year. Like, when I went on leave, I called a stand-up staff meeting to tell them. And in fact, I started the year with Brene Brown stuff, because that's my bread and butter for sure. And I feel like it just resonates so deeply with my heart that I can't lead without doing that, without being vulnerable. That I can't. I don't know how. It's not like a choice even. I can't do it. So I use that. I used her thing at the beginning of the year about getting in the arena and getting your ass kicked sometimes, and that's just how you do it. And so when I had the stand-up staff meeting to say I'm going on leave, I said, I told you at the beginning of the year that it's about getting in the arena. And I said, I just need to be honest, my ass is getting kicked right now. And so I just need to take some time. And so I think being honest with the staff as well. And again, that's probably, I'm sure there are some people who wouldn't choose to do that because they might feel like that doesn't exactly promote confidence in your staff that the leader is now on leave. I was worried about that for sure. And when I was trying to hold on, too long because I felt like as a leader, if I take a leave, what message does that send to the staff? Anyways, all of that, the vulnerability, I think, and being able to be honest when things were not going that well was important because that's the authenticity. And I am super lucky to have an admin partner who is like, she's ridiculous. She's amazing, and our fit is so great. And I know it's not always like that. I've been lucky that I've had great partnerships. And she's so, we laugh all the time, and we laugh with our office staff, and we stand at the front door, or I stand at the front door, she stands at the back door every single morning to say hello to every kid who comes in through the door. And we are out there in the halls all the time. And I feel like that is, we're able to give to, and that's not artificial. Like, we're in it. Those are our kids. So we're out in the parking lot chatting with the boys and their mullets and their trucks with the exhaust. And then we're out front talking to the smokers, and we're in the, we're in classrooms. And I just feel like we've just decided this is our family. We're just like two moms, and this is just it. That doesn't work for everybody. I'm just saying that that's how it works for us. And we're just there. And so we're going to find the positives, and we're going to laugh. And I do a week at a glance memo that has the like thank yous and celebrations at the beginning of it every single week, just to say, this is who I've seen. This is who I've recognized. And then at the end of the day, when the shitstorm has flown out the doors and the kids are on buses and the teachers have gone home, then my admin partner and I, we're very deliberate about at the end of every single day, we're saying, what's your positive for today? And there's just not another way to do it, because there is a positive in every day. And especially on the days when it just feels like absolute craziness, that's when it's more important to find the positives. And so I feel like we have that strength in our school. And so, yes, there are things that are, that change, and you kind of get one schedule going, and then, oh, it's the next quadmester. So we're going to use a different weekly schedule, a different timetable, a different daily schedule, different cohorts of kids, different everything. So I feel like we've just kind of given up fighting what should have been. And it's just like, well, this is what we have. And so our mindset is so, I feel so lucky that we have that strength, and that we're pulling in the same direction at the school. And I think it's through, I know the question is how does that happen? Because I know in some schools that doesn't happen. And again, being a learning coordinator, I got to visit a lot of different schools, and there was one school where I worked with the staff in the staff room, and then I had to go out to the recess yard to go talk to the principal because she refused to come in to talk to them, and they refused to go out to talk to her. And I just thought, as an outsider, that is not effective. There's something about that doesn't work. So that's the work, is a million tiny little things. I do think standing at the front door to say hello to every kid that comes in is a game changer. I do think asking staff to be outside their classroom for that first 2 minutes of the day, I think that's a game changer. I think, we got a little coffee cart, we had our masks and our face shields on, and we had coffee and we had gloves, and we took out coffee and hot chocolate around to each teacher in their class. And I just think it's a million things like that, like these tiny things that make staff feel like you're there for them. But that gives me a ton back too.
Do you think too, just before, I know Chris has something, but just before I go to Chris, you talked about being uncomfortable telling your staff you had to go on a leave, but do you think maybe in hindsight, you're modeling what you would hope that a staff member would do if they were in that situation, and that maybe
100%.
Your vulnerability in telling them that is saying, look, this is real, this could happen to you, and I hope that you do the same thing.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you that, again, the blessing for me was that I was trying hard to hold on, and it wasn't good. Like, I was sitting in my van every morning afraid to get on my van, afraid, like I was fearful. And I was hoping that if I could just, not that I was going to do something, but if a car hit my car, then at least I wouldn't have to go to school. Like, that's not a great way to be going to school. So, and I was so lucky to have a superintendent who supported me, because I called him one Sunday morning and at 7:30 in the morning. And he answered the phone, thank goodness, and he listened. And I just said, I just put everything out there. And again, I know that you could be in a situation where your superintendent, that's not a trusting atmosphere, but I was lucky. And he was able to give me what I needed by saying, like when I hung up the phone, he called the executive superintendent. He got a retired principal friend of his who was coming in the next day. So I was able to, there have been several staff who have come to me with different stuff, just needing to do something for their family or whatever. And I've been able to, I think, model that off of my superintendent to say, this is what we're going to do. This is what you need to do right now. I'm going to take care of these logistical things because you need to do this for you. And so, again, that was a huge blessing that I was sent, so that I could model that for others, I think.
Mm-hmm. All right, we lost Clough, but he's back, and I know he had something. So Clough, are you good?
Sure. A, B, or C? You get to choose, Heather.
C.
A. Oh, that's a good one. This one riffs off this. Yeah. See, I even wrote them down. I'm writing down stuff here. But C is this one. It's the long one. So,
Okay.
So, yeah, it's riffing a little bit off the avoiding the you got this mantra. So, are we okay?
Yep.
We're good.
Yep.
Okay, so you taking time away from the job, taking the time that was necessary. You said 6 weeks, and then becoming sort of a system navigator, but in a different system. So now you're sort of navigating a wellness system. Then you come back. So you can touch about if you would like to talk about just like what was it like navigating that system. Am I clear or no? Ish.
You're good right now, buddy. But
You're
it keeps cutting. I think it's the revenge of Clank.
All right, I'll see if I can get.
You're good. Oh, you were good.
Uh-oh. Maybe now's the time to tell Heather about Clank. So Chris had this laptop that he named Clank, or I don't know how we came to that name, but somehow it was named Clank, and Clank recently passed away. And Chris has not tried to revive it. So he's got a new computer. He's got a new setup. I think it's the ghost. It's coming
Clank
back
is
to
still
haunt him.
there. Yeah.
Clank is always going to be around. Even I'm scared of Clank. Like, just talking about him, I don't know what's going to happen. But since Chris kind of dropped off there, I think maybe I'll step up. And
That's
I was going to ask.
Yeah, I think C was a really long question.
That was the C. Never answer C again from Clough, I guess, eh? So we're going to wait until he pops back in. But I was going to ask you about your superintendent, but you just already you talked about your superintendent and said, well, here, let's get kind of down and dirty honest. And you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. But if I'm assuming your school board has a number of different superintendents.
Yes.
Are there some that you think that the conversation wouldn't have gone as smoothly with? Or do you, and I know, I don't want naming names, but I just feel like when you called your superintendent, were you so far gone that you were like, I'm done. Like, I need time. Yeah. I'm not going to have a conversation on whether I'm going to take time. This is what's happening. Do you think that do you think that played a part in the support you received from your superintendent? And do you think if you had...
That's a great question.
Okay.
Keep going. Okay. You can keep going.
I just wanted, because I wonder if you had gone to your superintendent and said, listen, I'm really struggling, and you were unsure, do I take time, do I not take time? I wonder what they would say. I wonder if they'd try to talk you out of it. I wonder if they would just be supportive the whole time. So I want to try to get a feel for the superintendent that you were dealing with at the time. I guess you before you went to them and said, I'm done, I'm going to take time, would you have felt comfortable saying to that individual, I think I need to take time?
It's a great question. And I never actually in that conversation said, I need to take time right now. In fact, I was saying, I think I can hold on until Christmas. And he was able to say, with the sentences that I was describing about like physical manifestations that were pretty significant, and also the like the thoughts, if I was just hoping that I could get sick enough that I could take time off work, like that's not healthy, and that's not who I am other than in that time. So I think I was very far gone by the time I called him. I had a breakdown the night before when I didn't sleep at all. Like I was just up in the night throwing up for most of the night. And then, so it was just, at that point, I feel like just from who I am and how far gone I was, I think no matter who my superintendent was, I would have made that call, because I was at a place where I just couldn't. I mean, my family had been trying really hard. It was not great. There were times where my husband I would just like lie in bed in the morning and crying, and my husband would just try to kind of give me a hug and try to get me off to school. And so I had a conversation once with my superintendent in, I think, mid-October, where I was saying, look, like it's a lot. I'm really, it's a lot of pressure. The thing is that I would say lots of us, educational leaders, and I'm not saying in terms of position of administrators, of strong teachers and leaders in the system, we're very, very good at keeping going. I would say lots of us are good at keeping going with a fairly high stress level. I read an interesting article about bandwidth in terms of mental health, and how people who are in positions of educational leadership tend to have a wider bandwidth than some other people just naturally. So you can kind of take on more stuff than some people can and still keep going. So I have a very, very high level of that. So things I would say that my superintendent didn't realize the individual impact on me, even when I was trying to say kind of mid-October, like, yikes, it's really like, this is a lot. So I think I probably would have said that to any superintendent, just because it was a bit of I'm really in trouble here. But it's hard to say, because I've been so blessed to have great superintendents who I have such trust in. I think it's a two-way street, because I think that even if a superintendent and a principal, or a principal and a vice principal, aren't really natural connected, kind of like kindred spirits, I think you go into it knowing these are my people. Because when you're a teacher, let's say you have 60 people on your staff, you're going to find kindred spirits, even if they're not in your department, or if they're not, in the teaching in the room next to you. When you're an administrator, you have one person that's your person in that building. And I know you have connections and allies, absolutely, like teacher leaders and office staff, and you have connections, and you have other administrators in other buildings, but really, you and that other person, that's it. That's your person. And your superintendent is your person. So I think I've gone into it always with a very open heart and open mind, saying, we're going to be an awesome partnership. And then you find the ways that you're an awesome partnership. I have been lucky to have very natural fits as superintendents, but I think as a principal, as a vice principal, as an administrator, it also behooves us to develop that atmosphere of trust. I think superintendents, I think they do want to support their principals. I absolutely get that feeling from our superintendents, the whole superintendent, senior admin of our board. There's a sense of, they're saying, we know the shitstorm that this year is with COVID. They are really trying their best to support. That's just my, there might be other people who don't feel like that, but I definitely do. Did that answer your question? I don't know if it did.
Oh, that was awesome. Thanks again for that.
Okay.
We're going to let Chris try this again.
Yeah. All right. So just my curiosity was around, becoming, you sort of lose your center being the administrator, mm-hmm. and then you go into some of the other spaces that are the support systems within the, it's the wellness, the benefits, the sort of, mm-hmm. you had mentioned therapists, medication, like just all these little different spaces that are new spaces to navigate. And I was just wondering about the challenges of sort of moving into that space where, I guess on one hand, there's an identity element to it, because now I don't have a better word, but you're moving sort of into patient mode, and simultaneously sort of transitioning out of, like, how easy was it for you to be cared for? I guess that's the heart of it. What was that like, where you had to look and accept the care in order to, and the last part to it, was there any space when you were like, was your wellness, was your plan to become well with the possibility of returning to the position, or was your focus to become well in general and then let's see what happens?
I know. Yeah. That was the scariest thing, I think. The scariest thing was, well, okay, I'm going to answer the two pieces. Part of it wasn't hard to transition because I was so unwell. I would say that my family was really worried for me. My mom and dad, I had lunch with them my second day on leave, and I went for a walk with my brother, a 2-hour walk, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried and cried for 2 hours. And I had lunch with my family, and my dad said, I just want my little girl back. And again, I'm 45 and I have kids, and that's not who I was. That's not who I am as a person. And so there was a real sense of necessity, I think, at that time. So as I just said, like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So I recognize that the job, I didn't feel like I was just taking time off. I felt like I was shifting my job, and my job became solely about, I need to get well. And so I dug in that kind of like neurotic, so I'm going to go to yoga every day, and or like, not every day, but I was really focused on that work. And so I did a lot of work. I had actually been using OPC, the Ontario Principals Council, has a program that we're connected to called Starling Minds, and it's an online mental health and wellness support. So I had been accessing that through the fall, and then somewhat ironically, this makes me laugh, I kind of mid-November, in a desperate attempt to kind of work on my wellness, I took a course. Of course I took a course. Because I needed something else to do. And the course was an OPC course called The Mental Wellness of the Leader. And so, like, 2 weeks into the course, I have to take a leave, and I'm like, I probably failed the course. Anyway, it did give me more time to work on the stuff I read a lot. I saw that counselor every week. So anyways, the hardest piece about going on leave was leaving my laptop at the school. And I felt almost sick to my stomach as I left it, because the laptop was for the principal who was taking my place. So from a logistic perspective, I couldn't take my laptop, but also it was this sense of, oh my gosh, like I can't not be doing that. But as soon as I left that, I drove from school directly to the counselor. And in terms of navigating the system, I'm very, again, I just keep saying I'm lucky. And another lucky thing is that I was working last year or 2 years ago with a social worker who's now the mental health lead for our system. And so we were quite close. And so I reached out to her on that Sunday, the same Sunday as I called the superintendent. I reached out to her. I reached out to the supervisor of social work, who I know as well. And I asked each of them, I said, I need you to find me somebody, because they know me, and I'm smart, and I talk a lot, and I'm over reflective. So I said, I need somebody who's going to cut through that bullshit, and I need to work on like my body is sick. So I got a great referral. It's not through EAP. So it's not, from a financial perspective, it's not through the EAP system. I had tried counselors before with EAP, and they were fine, but this was a great fit. So my benefits cover it. So it's just that I just pay and then send it into my benefit. So in terms of navigating the system, it's just remembering to send that in. But the hardest thing was leaving the job, like leaving the laptop. And then I just really dove into the work of getting better. So it was going to see the counselor regularly, and it was going to see my nurse practitioner right away. and sharing with her how ill I was. And so she immediately wrote a note. And the funny thing was that she said she would write it for as long as I needed to be off. And I said to both her and to my superintendent, I said, what if I just take 7 days? Like I just need 7 days if I just need to get a break. And my superintendent said, there's no way that you're taking 7 days. It's going to be at least 2.5 weeks. And then I said, well, can that be open-ended? And he said, well, I'm going to say it should be till Christmas, but it can be open-ended as long as you acknowledge that it's open-ended the other way too. And so you might not be ready to come back after Christmas. And to me, that was like, I can't even process that information. And the nurse practitioner said the same thing. So it was, part of that was like, I think like your cortisol levels are so high, you're just like, I have to be back. And so that was the work of the first 2 weeks, I would say, was just trying to eat and drink water and kind of get so that I wasn't in fight or flight mode 24 hours a day. And so then it was about trying to get well enough to try to decide, as you said, Chris, is this the job? Because I need to be more well to say whether this job is for me or not. Because I mean, if I had decided on November the 26th last year, I would have said no, because I'm so not well. But then when I was feeling better, then I wanted to go back and try it for the rest of the year. And so that was my kind of going back. I thought I'm gonna dig back in because I felt better and I had better practices. And then, and then I needed to have time to say, is this the job? Because I was actually thinking to myself, well, if I quit this, I think I have to go back on the OT list. Like, I think I have to actually apply to be on the supply list. And then maybe somebody would hire me. Like maybe Ramona would let me be her supply teacher if she's off. So at one point I was thinking that, but I'm just glad that I kind of got back in better practices, and I know that I'm supposed to be a principal. I just know that for me, again, part of the calling is, if God's calling me to be a principal, God's also given me a whole network of people that are there to support me, because the principalship takes a lot. And so the fact that I have the skills to do it, I also have to draw on the support of the people around me.
Holy crap. That was awesome. That really was awesome.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
I don't know if I answered the second part of it or not, but the first part I was I'm long-winded, so.
I didn't close it. I didn't close it well. I did have a close to it. I don't know. Do one of you two want to jump in?
I'm blown away by your honesty and authenticity. It really is appreciated. It's almost like my BS meter's been going off a lot lately, so it's nice that someone's going to come on and talk to us straight up about the job and about their experience with the job. And I feel for you. Like, it sucks that you had to experience that and you weren't well. Like, that sucks. But you've come out of it, and holy cow, if you're holding up during this COVID time, then you are superhuman, and people know that about you. So be careful.
No, that's the thing. That's the thing that's so amazing, I think, is that I don't think it sucked. I think it sucked in the middle of it for sure. I think it had to happen, honestly. And I want to make sure that it's not yes, the medication, I didn't have medication before the job, and I didn't see a counselor regularly before the job, but I'm okay with that. And I honestly think that there's a piece of the person that I am that also played into that, because there are tons of people that, yes, it can be stressful. It doesn't make them that sick. And I think what for me was the work that I had to do, and I keep having to do it in little bits, is you can't be perfect. You cannot please everybody. And it's not about being liked for me. I've figured out that some of my, a huge trigger for me is if I have to have a conversation where I feel like I'm disappointing somebody, and that's different than being liked. So if I have to have a conversation with a parent or a teacher where I feel like I'm letting them down or my integrity is being questioned, those are huge triggers. And I can still I know exactly where that lands in my body now, but I'm just a lot more aware of it than I was. But I think I had the same kind of issues as a teacher. It's just that as a teacher, I had so much control over my classroom, and I could work hard enough to be perfect enough at it that I could make all those relationships work with all those kids. I could make all the relationships work with all the teachers. I could be thorough enough that I would be satisfied. The thing is, as an administrator, There are positions that I'm put into, and that's fine. Like, I'm fine with it, but I just had to come to terms with that it doesn't matter how hard I work. It doesn't matter how good I am. It doesn't matter how well I speak, how well I listen, how well I solve the problem. There are people that are going to be unhappy. And that's tough. And it's not tough. Again, of course, everybody wants to be liked, but that sense of calling that's an Achilles heel as well, because if your calling is so strong, then you want to fix everybody. And you can't fix these poor kids that have been so traumatized. And you can't fix these broken parents or staff members that are dealing with such emotional harm themselves. Like, there's all kinds of stuff you can't fix. That's part of what I had to kind of come to terms with.
Heather, is that part of you talked about the messiness you did in your master's about the messiness of being a leader? Does that all fit part and parcel with that they're, you know, we can have a day at a glance, we can have a month at a glance, we can have a year at a glance, but it's still messy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, you go to work thinking one thing, you might want to get one thing done. And especially in COVID times, like, so my admin partner and I, we have the kids on staggered breaks because we have to have just a smaller number of kids outside, and teachers are teaching. And so we are doing the breaks. So basically so kids come in at 8:25, from 9:10 until about 12:55, we're out there for 40 minutes and then in for 20 and then out for 40, in for 20. Not a lot gets done. But it's good for kids, it's good for relationships, and staff see that we're visible. It's all good stuff. But man, oh man, we're not getting stuff done. So it's the messiness too of dealing with, I think the biggest part of the job in a pandemic is dealing with teacher stress, because the kids are happy to be back in school. Like, I know it's weird and they would rather not wear masks and they'd rather not have to stand 6 feet apart. But I think, and I just keep talking to them saying, you have to keep that mask on because we have to keep these schools open. Like, from a mental health perspective for kids, they have to be in school. Man, oh man. But for teachers, they're so stressed out with the change in timetable, in 4 periods a day with the same kids with the same subject, in like completely different assessment evaluation, no exams. Now you have you have kids working at home, but they don't really do the work at home. So now you have to triangulate using observation, conversation, and product. And it's all really good stuff. It's such good stuff. So it's just that it's trying to support, I find a lot of our job is trying to support teachers and in a way that's still sustainable for us. And I have to be careful about that. I've started making Christmas cards because I love the kind of little craftiness of it. So then I said to my husband last weekend, you know what? I'm going to make a Christmas card for every staff member. And again, because he cuts through all the bullshit, he's like, that's a stupid idea, because you're taking something you like and now you're making it into this huge task that you need to make 110 of them. I will tell you, because I'm stubborn, I have 95 made, but you know, but it's about doing tiny little things to help them see that we're there for them. And that's just this massive, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. Like, you have so much impact on people. And you know when you're making their day better, or you're just asking one question about assessment, and when somebody's open, like, and you just ask a question and then they're like, and I feel like that, especially with newer teachers or younger teachers, I feel like if I can just a little tiny bit, man, that's having a huge impact, and that impact goes on for years and years and years. I don't even know what the question was.
It was around just the messiness of being a leader, that there's so much and
oh, right. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
There's no way to say this is Monday, this is Tuesday. Like, you got to be able to roll with it.
No. Yeah. And the messiness as well is recognizing the there's always negotiation, there's always alliances and informal, there's power, there's positions of power. And then there's also those staff members who have a lot of informal pull. And if those staff members it's just important to have a respectful relationship with those staff members, whether I agree with everything they say or not, because I know that can be poison to a school. If there are really powerful staff members who are feeling disenfranchised and not supported, that is a wicked, wicked, wicked thing to work through. And so my job from a very micro political perspective. And I'm not being Machiavellian. I'm not doing it in some kind of, I'm a benevolent Machiavellian person.
Aren't we all? Aren't we
I'm
all?
doing it for good reasons.
Chris, question?
Sure. How has the fight changed in you? Coming back after your time off, and then your time away for wellness. I'm thinking about one of those leadership questions that always pops up in an interview. Something along the lines of, tell me about a time that you had a challenging conversation with insert, colleague, parent. I think for you, I want to put system though. Tell me about a time that you're having this challenging conversation, because I wonder how differently your lens might be now. And if you've ever found yourself at odds with the system, and it could be for your personal ethic, or it could be because you're pushing back on the super, saying, no, like that's right now, that's not right for our school. And I'm kind of riffing a little bit on Chids's comment there, talking about needing leaders, right? And it strikes me that's one of those courageous spaces to step into, where you're prepared to kind of, like, you'd strike me as someone you're prepared to just like, let's go, like let's do it, like come on, bring it on, right? But how does that look? How does that look? How does that look now to you?
It's a good question. And I'm going to say that in our system, there is some friction between principals and senior admin in terms of feeling the support. But I will say in this situation, my pushback is not against senior admin, because there's been some concerns about direction of senior admin, and I think principals feeling like we can't do anymore, and we're being given this, and not feeling supported enough, or that kind of stuff. And I think my pushback has been more about with some of my colleagues. So here's an example: suspensions of students who are First Nations, or have an IEP, or have already been suspended previously in the year. And what we're trying to work on as a board is, we know that we have to be really careful about our equity as a board. We need to make sure that we're not underserving populations. And so senior admin has directed that there's another, like if we're going to suspend a student who is FNMI or has an IEP, then we need to have conversation with our superintendent first. And there's some pushback from principals, feeling like that is infringing on the principal's right to do things in the school, and also that it's just oh dear, that it's just the that the principal should be allowed to do what they have the right to do. And I'm going to say that my pushback has been, when some of my colleagues are really feeling super frustrated, my pushback is to them rather than to senior admin, because for me, I've worked really hard this summer to do a lot of unlearning and learning around equity, and around what my role is as a white woman of immense privilege and power. I'm a principal of a school. I'm married. I am white. I am Christian. I am well educated. I am financially stable. I am, like the list goes on and on. And so I'm just super aware, and have become more and more aware of the responsibility that is on my shoulders as somebody in that position. And so I feel like, I'm going to, I think I need to reflect. I need to reflect. And so if me calling my superintendent makes me question before I suspend a student who is, in big data terms, underserved big time, like way undergraduating, way whatever, well then I don't think that's bad. And so for me, the pushback is, I think gentle. Like, I think I'm not going to say to somebody else, you're wrong, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with our system saying, like, let's have a look. So I think that's my most recent. And I know that I'm a younger principal, like younger as in newer to the job. So I know that I'm having those conversations with people who have been principals longer than I have. But like, I have worked with some of them before, and we have great relationships, and I respect them, and I know they respect me. So I feel like I said to my counselor just a couple weeks ago that the thing that I'm really kind of coming to grips with is, if, like, the thing that I think is, I don't even know, this is not going to come out, I'm not going to be able to say this well. The thing that I'm coming to grips with is, it's a powerful position. And I would never, ever, ever, I don't think anybody should take the position because of the power. But to have a position where, if you have the skills, the intelligence, and the ability to listen, and the ability to problem solve, and the ability to communicate, and then you're put in this position where you can ask questions respectfully, but in a way that pushes people's thinking on all levels. That's so powerful. Like, if you think about the change that you can make, not like, we are saving kids' lives. We are saving kids' lives in schools. And the, if anything that I can do is helping to just shift that a little bit, man, oh man, I'm willing to have those conversations in a respectful way. Yeah. I think a lot of that work, again, that's why I know, Roland, you said, I'm sorry about the time that you had off. I actually think that was part of the journey. I honestly think that was necessary in the journey for me to help reflect more on the power of when I say the power, I don't think that's the right word. I think it's the right word, but it's not like I hate the word power, because it's not about a power. What is it? What's the word?
Influence? Would influence the influence you have?
See, yeah. I like that word power. I mean, that the word power is, I think it speaks kind of clearly to the dynamic of what can happen. And I mean, you feel like you have a hand on it, but that electric current, like I kind of dropped into the chat there, like that unshielded or unmitigated is part of what I think sometimes, observing some leaders, if they're unaware of the density and flow of that power, or they're of the mindset that they need to always be sort of in absolute control of it, I think that's when you get the feedback loop. And you sort of think to be like, you are the only one that can fix things. You have to be on call all the time. And that's just like, that's like ultra marathons, right? That's ultra marathon kind of thinking. And not everyone, I think there's more people built to be principals than there are principals built to be ultra marathon principals. Like, that's just, it's not something that is worthwhile training for, in my mind.
I think I do feel bad for what you experienced, because, and I get what you're saying, that it was meant to be. When you look back on it now, you're like, thank God it happened, because it set me up for what's happening now. I totally get that. Chris and I have talked about that like many times, how this universe works, and that when you're in the middle of something, I just feel bad that you had to experience eating issues and sleeping issues and emotional issues for you to get to where you need to be. It sucks, right? But we all know that those times are the times that solidify certain things for us and put us on a course that we would never imagine for ourselves. So that's kind of what I meant by it. But listening to you talk about your experience, I can feel the energy like resonating. Like, I can feel that you're in a place where you're moving. And, you talk about in your answer to Chris's question about you're going to go where you need to go to get the job done. And clearly you seem like a person who's interested in doing this job for all the right reasons. You just strike me as an authentic person, which makes makes you dangerous in a way, because I can imagine staff who want, this is what I remember from principal course part 1. I remember talking about the different types of people that exist. And then as the leader of a school, you're going to have to accommodate these. There were 4 groups of people, right? Traditionalists and this and this. And our instructor was like, you have to remember that the people you're leading, the people you're working with, the people you're communicating with, they're probably going to fit into one of these boxes. And so when you make one decision, you're going to upset 3 types of people. When you make this decision, you're going to upset 2 types of people. And he was just trying to get us open to the fact that, what are some of the things that you value and what can you use to make your decisions in consultation with the right people to make the right decision, whether it's going to upset people or not. And I think when I think of you, I think of some of my colleagues would really dislike working with you, because they know you're going to go after what you need to go after. But some people, or it's true, some people like that. Some people like that. I'm an educator that would prefer to work. I want to work for an administrator who's going to treat me like a human. So if you're not going to treat me like a human, I'm not interested in working for you. And with that comes, there's a mess. So usually the people who treat me like a human, they're not as organized as the principals who don't treat me like a human. They're uber organized. Everything's laid out for the next 10 years of life. Like, it's just out there. I would rather work for someone who is going to treat me well and maybe not hand back my report cards an hour after I hand them in, type of thing. So again, you're causing me to reflect on my position around leadership. You've got me thinking about some of the experiences I've had that really sucked, but I feel like you. I'm glad that I went through them, because they've informed me. They've provided me with a new way of looking at things. And then, when you drop the word equity, that's a whole, like, I could talk for hours about that alone, but I'm not going to. But it's nice that you acknowledge your privilege in all. Wow, you were listing off like a whole whack of privilege there. That's pretty cool. But I think because it's there, you're going to harness that influence, that power, that privilege, and you're going to kind of shoot it out to help other people.
Right. That's what I was thinking about that with this, like I said, the school is quite visually homogeneous, let's say, and there's a really dominant culture of like, I love the school. I love it, love it, love it. And it just represents this small town community that I live in that is, it's pretty culturally homogeneous. But I think that means that there's work for us to do, because I think not everybody feels like there's work for us to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think when things are in your face, it's sometimes easier for conversations around equity to happen, because there's a recognition that they need to happen. And so some of the work is helping people to see that the conversations need to happen, or having the conversation with people who don't think it needs to happen. So, when I have a speaker coming in to speak with classes virtually, of course, because of COVID, and about anti-racism and the power of language, and a teacher emails to say, does this have to be during class time, or can we do it outside of class time, because I have to get through a lot of curriculum? Then my job as a leader is to say, no, we're doing this because this is important stuff. And so I just think there's lots of work to be done in the school. And I just think there's a lot of growing to do, and I'm in a hard position. I'm not in a hard position. I'm in a very easy position, but what right do I have as a liberal-minded white woman, who are Ibram X. Kendi talks about them as being the most dangerous, more dangerous than out and out racists, because there's this feeling like, oh, I'm just trying to do my best. So it is about being very aware of just placing myself in that conversation, and what's my job. But Peggy McIntosh talks about that invisible backpack, and one thing she talks about is part of your responsibility as somebody who has that invisible privilege that you don't even know, is to use your privilege in the system to dismantle the system. And so there's some power in. So here's one tiny example. So our student council, love them to death. And of course, we have to say no to everything they want to do because of COVID. Everything. We're the fun police. And so they wanted to they were doing some dress up days for Spirit Days, because you can't do anything else. You can't get together. You can't do fun things. So then an announcement went on. We didn't know this announcement was happening, that we were going to have Nerds and Jocks Day. And I was like, what? We can't have like Nerds and Jocks Day. What if some poor grade 9 girl goes to school and then somebody says, oh, I love your outfit, and she didn't dress up, and she doesn't know who she is, and she doesn't feel like she fits in? That girl's not coming back to school. And so we can't have this happen. But my poor student council has just announced it, and they're just trying their best to have something fun. And so this is just one more of these things where, as a leader, what is my responsibility? But also, not just my responsibility, but who else gets to do on the announcements without even asking? I get to go on the announcements because I'm the principal. And so I go on the announcements to say, and I just, again, because that's who I am, I just put it out there and I say, student council, totally, and I talked to student council first. I said, I totally appreciate what you're doing. I did talk to my vice principal partner first, because we were both like, okay, this can't happen, but we have to do this in a way that respects the intent versus impact. So I literally went on the announcements and had this 4-minute, whatever, not a lecture, but I used the words intent versus impact. And who else gets to just pick up that announcement and speak to 600 kids at a time about the fact that we're not going to do Nerds and Jocks Day? We're going to shift this. So it's what is everybody's inner nerd, because everybody loves something. Like you love Star Wars, you love Seattle Seahawks, you love camouflage pants, you love whatever, hunting, but don't bring your gun, you love whatever. So I just feel like that was this tiny, tiny example of every single day I get to do that. And so that's where I've been put in that place. And part of that whole being on leave was to make me more humble, 100,000%. That had to happen because I had to be humbled, because not even Heather, who can work hard at everything, not even Heather can do everything. But now that I'm in a better place, then I'm going to take on these things when I recognize that this just can't happen the way it is. And then I have the chance, and I was put in this spot to do this. That's calling. And I know that's tiny, but I just feel like that's such a great metaphor for the huge blessing that it is to be an administrator. And that's the sales pitch for why you should be administrators. The end. Drop the mic.
I think that's perfect. I think you brought up equity, and I feel like we could talk like that for another hour, but I feel like I need to be respectful of your time and of my gentleman's time here. But we really would like to thank you, Heather, for being a part of this tonight. And I think our minds are blown with your honesty. And I hope that the folks who watch this know, but I really do think that this is something that we don't talk about. And I hope that the people who watch this, who need to understand it's okay to take a break, will take that break because of what you said tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And also I would also like you.
Thanks for letting me talk.
Yeah. And I'd also like you to just, if you wouldn't mind just sharing your Twitter handle, if people want to contact you through Twitter. We usually have you put it in. I forgot to tell you that in your name and place. If you just let us know what your Twitter handle is so that people can contact you if they're interested. I think it's HJ. Is H.
I'm looking it up.
I just type Heather and it comes up.
Yeah, it's at HJAKOBI.
Yeah. All right. So
I
thank you
put
very
it in
much.
there instead of just Heather.
Yes, we usually ask you to do that, and I think that was my job, and I fell down on the job, so I'm fired, basically. But I appreciate very much, Heather, you being a part of this, and on behalf of the gentleman, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great week.
Yep.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you for indulging me. Nice to meet you, Roland and Chris.
Absolutely.
Same here.
Yep.
Good luck.
Great meeting you.
Good luck with playing.
Thank you.